I didn't sleep much the night before. Maybe it was the humming of the ceiling fan, or the fact that my mind kept circling the same thought. Her voice. The way it lingered after a conversation, softer than it should have been, like the last note of a song you can't quite shake off. I wasn't supposed to notice. She was married. Not just married. Married to someone I knew, someone who trusted me. But lately, when I closed my eyes, I saw more than I should. And it left me restless in bed, tossing around with the sheets twisted up like proof of my guilt. The next morning, I told myself to shake it off. I had work at the auto repair shop, grease waiting to stain my hands, engines waiting to be coaxed back to life. The smell of oil and metal usually grounded me, made me forget everything else. But then she walked in. Her name, Clara, mid-40s, confident without trying. She wasn't dressed up, just jeans and a faded gray jacket, but she carried herself like she didn't need to announce anything to the room. Her hair was pinned back loosely, a few strands escaping around her face. She had a way of making silence feel intentional, like she was always a step ahead of the words people said to her. She leaned on the counter, setting her keys down. The engine's been making this grinding sound. Thought I'd drop it in before it gets worse. I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded, maybe too quickly. Yeah, sure. I'll take a look. My voice cracked just enough to embarrass me. Her eyes flicked up at me, steady, unreadable. Then she smiled, brief, not a wide grin, just a small curve that made me forget what I was doing. I busied myself with the paperwork, asking the routine questions, pretending to concentrate. But I could feel the air shifting. Every time she answered, there was a pause, like she was deciding whether to give me the whole truth or just the part one could handle. When I finally crouched to check the car, she stepped closer, looking over my shoulder. I felt the brush of her sleeve against mine, light, accidental, or maybe not. My chest tightened, and for a second, I couldn't tell if the noise I heard was the engine or my own pulse pounding in my ears. "You're good with this stuff?" she said softly. I almost dropped the wrench. It wasn't the words, it was the way she said them. Not casual, not distant. She didn't have to compliment me, but she did. "Just takes practice," I managed. My throat felt dry. There was a silence after that. Not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy. The kind where you're both aware of it, and neither of you moves to break it. She looked at me a moment longer, then glanced away, as if she'd remembered where she was, who she was. I stood up too quickly, nearly bumping into her. The space between us shrank for a heartbeat, and I caught the faintest scent of her perfume. Something clean, subtle, the kind that clings without asking for attention. I stepped back, muttering an apology. She just tilted her head, studying me, as if she'd seen more than I meant to reveal. "Let me know when it's ready," she said finally, her tone even again. She gathered her things, but before leaving, she paused. Her fingers brushed the counter, then stilled, like she'd considered saying something else but thought better of it. And then she was gone, the shop door swinging shut behind her. I stared at the empty space she left, the faint echo of her presence sharper than the smell of oil in the air. That moment, the brush of her sleeve, the weight of her silence, followed me the rest of the day. I kept replaying it, wondering if I imagined it, if I wanted it too badly. Either way, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't long before she came back. Not about the car this time. At least, not really. She said she needed someone to check if the battery was draining faster than it should, but the way she lingered told me it wasn't just about the machine. It was late afternoon, the shop quieter than usual. Most of the crew had gone for the day, leaving just me with the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of rubber. Clara stood by the open hood of her car, arms folded across her chest, like she was bracing against something colder than the air. "You sure you don't mind?" she asked. Her voice carried that practiced lightness people use when they don't want to admit they're worried. "Not at all," I said. "I've got time." I tried to sound casual, but my eyes kept catching on small details. Her hands, for one. She had long fingers, the kind that looked like they were meant for something delicate, not resting against the chipped metal of an old sedan. They were clasped tighter than they needed to be, her nails pressing faint crescents into her palms. I bent over the engine, giving myself something to focus on, but I felt her watching. Not constantly, just in those in-between moments, like when I glanced up and caught her eyes before she shifted them away. "Long day?" I asked without looking at her. She gave a little laugh, quiet, unsteady, more exhale than sound. "Every day feels long lately." The words slipped out like she hadn't meant to say them. She looked down immediately, tugging her jacket sleeve over her wrist. A tiny gesture, but it landed heavier than anything else she could have said. I wanted to ask what she meant. Wanted to step into that space she'd accidentally opened. But I stayed bent over the engine, pretending to check wires I already knew were fine. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint ticking of cooling metal. Then, softer, "Sorry. You don't need to hear me complain." I wiped my hands on the rag, hesitated, then looked up. "Doesn't sound like complaining." Her eyes lifted, just for a second, and I swear I saw something flicker there, something raw, unguarded. But then she blinked it away, turning back toward the shop door. She started to say something else, stopped, pressed her lips together. That pause hung between us heavier than the smell of oil. I closed the hood, slower than necessary. She stepped forward, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her hand trembling just slightly before steadying. When I handed her the keys, our fingers almost touched. She pulled back quicker than I expected, her face carefully composed again. "Thank you," she said, voice even. But her eyes lingered a second longer, as if her gratitude carried more weight than the word could hold. And just like that, she was gone again, leaving me in the quiet shop with nothing but the echo of her laugh and the memory of her trembling hand. A soft moment, but one that pressed itself into me, deeper than I wanted to admit. The rain had started sometime after sunset. By the time I finished cleaning up the shop, it was steady and cold, hammering the roof in a rhythm that made the place feel emptier than usual. I was locking the front when headlights cut through the downpour, and her car rolled up, wipers fighting against the sheets of water. Clara stepped out with her jacket pulled tight around her shoulders, strands of hair sticking damply to her face. "Sorry to drop by this late," she said quickly, almost apologetic. The lights on the dash started flashing again, and I didn't know where else to go. I should have told her to come back tomorrow. I should have pointed her to the 24-hour shop down the street. Instead, I unlocked the door again and motioned her inside. The shop smelled of wet pavement and oil. The rain softened everything, muting the world outside, so it felt like just the two of us. She perched on a stool by the counter while I bent over her car, pretending to focus on the flickering dashboard. "You don't have to stay," I said without looking up. "I'll check it and let you know." Her voice came softer, closer than I expected. "I'd rather wait." I glanced over my shoulder. She'd slipped off her jacket, damp from the rain, and was rubbing her hands together for warmth. Something about that small motion, ordinary, vulnerable, pulled at me. Minutes stretched. I tried to fill them with talk about alternators and faulty wiring, but the words landed flat. The silence that followed pressed harder, thick with everything unsaid. She broke it first. "Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time? Like you're living someone else's life, and yours is still waiting?" Her voice cracked just enough to make me forget the wires in my hands. I straightened, wiping them on a rag, searching her face. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on the rain streaking down the window. For the first time, she didn't seem untouchable. She looked tired, worn, almost fragile. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell her that I knew exactly what she meant, that half my nights were restless because of it. But the words stuck, tangled in guilt and fear. The sudden buzz of her phone on the counter snapped the moment in two. She flinched, grabbing it quickly. A name flashed across the screen, one I knew but didn't say out loud. Her husband. She silenced the call without answering. The room went quiet again, except now the silence cut sharper, full of everything neither of us could admit. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't guarded, it was searching. Her lips parted like she might say something, but no words came. I felt myself leaning in, just slightly, drawn by something I didn't have the strength to fight. The distance between us shrank to a breath. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to mine. And then, she pulled back, grabbing her jacket, her composure snapping back into place. "I should go," she whispered. But her voice trembled, and I was left standing in the quiet shop, rain pounding outside, wondering if we'd just crossed a line we couldn't name. The rain had passed, but the air still carried its weight, damp, heavy, thick with the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat too clearly. Clara had come back the next week, not with a broken car this time, but with a box of pastries she claimed were a thank you. We sat in the back office after hours, the shop closed, the faint hum of the soda machine the only sound. She set the box between us, opened it, then barely touched a bite. I pretended to be hungrier than I was, chewing slower than I needed to, just to stretch the time. Her eyes drifted often, toward the wall clock, toward the floor, anywhere but me. I couldn't take it anymore. "You don't usually bring gifts," I said lightly, but the words landed heavier than I intended. She smoothed a napkin flat against the desk. Maybe I just wanted an excuse. The silence that followed was sharp, filled with the kind of meaning neither of us could claim. My throat tightened. Clara, her name felt dangerous on my tongue. She looked at me then. Really looked, no guard, no half-smile. "What are we doing?" It wasn't accusation. It wasn't playful. It was bare, stripped down to the bone. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What answer could I give? That I thought about her every night? That I waited for the sound of her footsteps more than I wanted to admit? Instead, I said, "I don't know." Her gaze didn't waver. "This, whatever this is, it isn't normal." I forced a shaky laugh. "Nothing about this feels normal." She leaned back in the chair, crossing her arms, but it wasn't defensive. It was holding herself together. I tell myself it's harmless. A visit here, a conversation there. But then I hear myself saying things I've never said out loud. I swallowed hard. Like what? Her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes dropping to her hands. She traced a circle on the rim of her coffee cup, over and over, as though the motion kept her steady. That I feel seen. The last word came out small, fragile. The air thickened, pressing between us. I didn't move. I didn't dare. My chest ached with all the things I wanted to say. How I'd never felt more awake in anyone's presence. How her silences spoke louder than anyone else's words. But I stayed still, because one wrong step and it would all collapse. She finally looked up again, eyes shining in the dim light. "You're too young to understand what that means." Her words stung, but not the way she intended. They landed like a truth she needed me to accept, like a wall she hoped would hold. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I just whispered back, "Then explain it to me." Her breath hitched, sharp, and the silence that followed was devastating. A week passed before I saw her again. I told myself I was fine with that, busy with work, busy with everything else. But the truth was, I caught myself listening for the sound of her car more than I should have. When she finally showed up, it wasn't with a car problem or an excuse. She just appeared in the doorway of the shop near closing time, a small paper bag in her hand. "Coffee," she said simply, lifting it like a peace offering. I nodded, trying not to show how much it mattered. We sat on overturned crates near the back, sipping in silence. The coffee was already cooling, but neither of us seemed to mind. Her shoulders looked heavier that evening, like she'd been carrying something all day. She kept her jacket on, fingers tugging at the zipper absent-mindedly. I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to break the fragile calm we'd built. She broke it herself. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly, her voice softer than the hiss of rain on the pavement outside. I glanced up. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were fixed somewhere far beyond the shop walls. "Who?" I asked carefully. She hesitated, then dug into her bag. Out came a folded photo, edges worn, like it had been carried too long. She placed it face up on the crate between us. A younger man stared back, smiling, confident, maybe mid-20s. The resemblance hit me before I wanted to admit it. Same dark hair, same unguarded grin. "My brother," she whispered. "He died when he was 24. The air thickened, pressing against my chest. I didn't know what to say. The photo seemed to vibrate between us, alive with all the weight it carried. She touched the corner of it gently, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. I haven't shown this to anyone in years. I swallowed hard, words dry in my throat. "Why me?" Finally, her eyes lifted to mine, steady but raw. Because sometimes when you laugh, it's like he's in the room again. And I don't know if that's a comfort or a punishment. My hands clenched in my lap, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to reach across the space, to take the photo, to tell her she wasn't alone. But I stayed still, afraid of breaking something too delicate. The silence stretched, deeper than any we'd shared before. She exhaled shakily and slid the photo back into her bag, as if hiding it made the truth less dangerous. "I shouldn't have told you that," she murmured. "You should," I said before I could stop myself. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Her eyes lingered on me then, longer than they ever had. And in that gaze, I felt the shift, the ground moving under us. Not because we'd touched, not because of anything said too boldly, but because she'd trusted me with a ghost. And I didn't know how to carry it without falling deeper. The photo never left my mind. Even when days passed, even when I tried to drown myself in work, I carried it like a shadow. I wondered if she regretted showing me. I wondered if she avoided the shop because of it. Then one evening, she returned. No car trouble, no bag of coffee. Just herself. The shop was empty, the air heavy with the scent of rubber and gasoline. She stood in the doorway a moment before stepping in, her gaze sweeping the room as if searching for a reason to stay. "You're still here," she said softly. "I usually am," I answered. We didn't move closer at first. It felt like something fragile stretched between us, invisible but undeniable. Finally, she walked over, resting her hands on the counter. They looked steadier than before, though I could see the faintest tremor in her thumb. "I've been thinking," she said. I waited. "This thing between us." She exhaled, long and shaky. "It isn't fair. Not to you. Not to me." Her words landed heavy, but not final. "I know," I said quietly. Her eyes found mine. "And yet, here we are." The silence pressed closer. I noticed everything about her in that stillness. The faint lines around her eyes, the tired curve of her mouth, the way her chest rose and fell like she'd been holding her breath too long. I wanted to tell her how much space she'd taken up in my head, how every restless night began with her. But instead, I just stepped closer until the counter no longer divided us. She didn't move away. "I don't want to ruin anything," she whispered. "But I can't keep pretending either." Her voice broke on that last word. I felt it more than heard it. So I reached out, slowly, carefully, and set my hand over hers. Not gripping, not pulling, just resting there, steady against her trembling fingers. Her breath hitched. She looked down at our hands, then back up at me. The vulnerability in her eyes cut deeper than any confession could. No declarations, no promises, just the truth that sat quietly between us. We were already past the point of turning back. We stood like that for what felt like a lifetime, saying nothing, letting silence do what words couldn't. Then, gently, she leaned forward, not all the way, not into a kiss, but enough that her forehead touched mine. A small, fragile gesture, yet it carried the weight of everything unspoken. Her whisper came so faint I almost didn't catch it. "This is all we can allow." And I nodded, eyes closed, heart breaking and swelling at once. We stayed there, forehead to forehead, hand in hand, holding still in the quiet collapse of something neither of us could deny. It wasn't a beginning. It wasn't an end. It was the only truth we had. I think about that night more often than I should. Not because of what happened, because, really, nothing happened. Not in the way people would expect. No declarations. No stolen kisses. Just her forehead against mine, my hand steadying hers, and a silence that said everything words couldn't. And yet, it changed me. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't about wanting something forbidden or crossing lines we couldn't uncross. It was about seeing someone, not who they pretended to be, not who the world demanded, but the raw person beneath, and letting them see me too. Clara taught me that love isn't always about the things you claim. Sometimes it's about restraint, about holding still when every nerve in your body is begging you to move. Sometimes love is the quiet knowledge that you could, but you don't. I was 20-something then, restless, reckless, impatient. She was older, steadier, carrying losses I couldn't fully understand. I think part of her feared I'd break under the weight of them. But instead, I learned how heavy silence can be, and how holy a single touch can feel when it's the only one you're allowed. Did it last? No, not the way you'd write in a storybook. Life pulled us back to where it wanted us. Her with her commitments, me with my restless steps forward. But the connection, that stays. In small ways. I still notice the details people overlook. The tremor in a hand, the hesitation in a laugh, the way someone's eyes dart when they want to say more but can't. She sharpened me that way. She made me pay attention. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks of me too. If, on quiet nights, she remembers the hum of that old repair shop, the smell of oil and rain, the way we held on to silence like it was a secret just for us. What I know for sure is this. Love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like two people sitting too close, saying too little, and feeling too much. And sometimes that's enough. Even now, when I lie awake and the ceiling fan hums above me, I remember her words. This is all we can allow. It wasn't permission. It was a boundary, but it was also an acknowledgement that what we shared was real, even if it had no future. And for me, that was enough to carry forward. Enough to make me softer. Enough to make me braver when the right kind of love finally came. So if you're listening, if you've ever felt restless in your own skin, waiting for something unnamed, maybe the lesson is this. Sometimes the most powerful loves are the ones that never fully happen. They stay with you anyway. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?